about students, and then you go out and you interview students, give them a short survey, you get back their responses, and that's how you get your data. That you go out, you think of something that you're interested in about students, and then you go out, ask a few questions to them, get their responses back, and then compile that data. They're nice in terms of, they're pretty compact. You get lots of interesting stories. You know students well. And so you can come up with all types of things here. I've had students in the past, GPA is a pretty popular one to do because you all understand GPA. Collecting the data is not too bad, and things like that. But I've had students in the past do ones on, for example, how many photo tags do you have on Facebook? So they go through and they ask their friends, how many pictures do you have tagged of yourself on Facebook? And then what they thought about was what would influence the number of photo tags you have on Facebook. So the number of friends you have on Facebook, and the key thing to them was, were you male or female? And their idea was that if you were female, you had more photo tags on Facebook than if you were male. That was fine. It wasn't like a super, super serious study, but for this class, that's perfectly fine. I'm not necessarily looking for you to do groundbreaking research. So you can study anything. So if you want to say, how many friends does a person have on Facebook? That's perfectly fine. What you need to think about is what then would influence how many friends you have on Facebook, and then how would you be able to collect that data? Okay. So anything about student behavior. So if you want to ask students, how long do they, or how much money do they spend on spring break? Perfectly fine. Okay. If you want to ask students, I've had a few times in the past, how many classes does a student skip? That's a perfectly fine topic. Anything that you can go and ask students about and collect that data about students and be able to do a survey, perfectly good. With surveys, my suggestion typically is that you do somewhere from maybe 6 or 7 questions up to about 12 questions. So with student surveys, you want to do 6 to 12 questions typically. You don't want too many questions because you just get way too much data at that point and you start to bog yourself down. But you don't want to have too little because otherwise you're not going to get a lot of good results. Another thing that you always want, if you do anything with surveying students, you need a question about gender. It's always good to know male versus female because you can always see if there's a difference between them. So, that's an easy one. So that's one type of project. As I said, a lot of projects I see are these student survey-ish projects.
What would be a good sample size for student survey?
I typically say about 100. So typically if you have a group of 4, what I suggest is that you all do about 25 surveys. In the past I've done where students in class will pass out surveys and get them back. I've noticed a little bit more things happen that some students use like SurveyMonkey or things like that and do surveys online. That's okay, except the only thing is you don't always know if you're doing like students, are you getting all Towson students, or are you getting like students from Loyola or things like that, so that's the only thing there. But yeah, about 100 surveys, I would say. So that's one type of project. Now the other type of project is Data from the internet projects. If we were 20 years ago, I'd say you'd go data from the library, but nowadays you can do all your data searching really on the internet, although you could go to the library and get on the internet there. So, but the idea here is that you get data that's already available. In this case, you're making your own data set. Okay? But in this case, what you're going to do is you're going to actually go out and collect data from the internet. Okay? Now, this can be pretty much, honestly, anything you want, because there's all types of data on the internet. So you could do things like, for example, what determines the selling price of a house? Okay. And so what you can think about is, what things do determine the selling price of a house? So we talked about that earlier. The size of the house, the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms. How big is the yard? Yeah. We might think that if you look at data from around here, there might be a difference between houses in Baltimore County versus Baltimore City. But people might pay extra to be in Baltimore County so they can have better schools than Baltimore City. So you could think about that. You could think about, does the house have a finished basement? Does the house have a deck? You could think about any number of things. But what you can do is go out, collect that data from online. So you go onto like a real estate website and say, okay, this house is listed at this price, has this many bedrooms, this many bathrooms, is this many square feet, is this old? And collect all that data, and you have a data set there. I've had students in the past who've tried to figure out what determines the selling price of a used car. Okay. Again, sort of a similar idea. You would think about what things would influence the selling price of a used car. So things like how much mileage does it have? How old is the car? What are some of the amenities of the car in terms of maybe is it a convertible or a non-convertible? Things of that nature, and then you go out and collect that data, and then you'll be able to tell me a story with that data. A popular project in the data-driven ones is what determines how well does a sports team do. Okay? So some people will go out, they'll collect data, for example, about the NFL. And what they'll ask is, what determines how many wins an NFL team has? So, for example, with the Ravens signing Bolden, how much does that matter? Okay, so we could ask that question. And so what you'd want to think about is, what determines how well does an NFL team do? Well, how many offensive yards do they gain? We think teams that get more yards usually do better than teams that get less yards. We could also then ask the same thing, defense. Okay. Teams that give up less yards on defense do better. We can ask questions about turnovers, penalties. Okay. And so what you would do is you could go on a website like NFL.com or ESPN.com, get the basic descriptive statistics for each team, collect them, and then you have your data set. And so, every semester I see one about the NFL. I see one usually, well, not more than one, on baseball. Very rarely do I see hockey, which is kind of disappointing. And I see some basketball. Okay? So you could go out and collect them. Sports is nice because sports, the data is readily available. It's right there. You don't have to do a lot of work to collect it. As I said, you just go to ESPN.com and you can just get that data and very quickly compile your data. But what you'd want to think about with any of these things is what does contribute. For example, if you're doing winning, what contributes to how many wins a baseball team has, or a hockey team has, or an NFL team has, or a college team. You can do college sports too. You could do things about, what determines a baseball team's attendance. So